Hello everyone, welcome to episode 40 of Knitter Matters. I'm Cheryl Lampard, I'm an image consultant, my company is Style Matters International, and I'm also a knitting instructor and educator. It's my pleasure to have done this series of Knitter Matters. I used to own a yarn store back in the UK, and one of the great joys of that is that you get to be able to teach people how to knit. And now all these years later I'm teaching again, and it's wonderful. Now, I said I would never do this and wear a crazy Christmas sweater. I was going to be terribly elegant today, but I thought, oh, it's been a crazy year. Let's just be crazy today. So this is probably the only time you're going to see me in a crazy sweater, but here it is in its full glory, and it's not even a hand knitted one. Shame on me. Anyway, I'm just going to take my seat and we'll start, because today I want to tell you I'm taking a break next week over the Christmas and New Year festivities. So there's no Knitter Matters next Tuesday, but when we return on January the 5th, we're going to actually start at a different time because of the feedback that we've had. I know in the US that a later time is going to be a better time. Oh, hi Peggy Ann, thanks for joining us. So we're going to actually start in the new year on January the 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now I do appreciate that for my UK friends and viewers, that's a little late, but think of it this way, when you wake up the next morning, you'll be able to watch a replay of the Knitter Matters from the night before. So it's not so bad after all. Anyway, we're going to try that out. So today it's all about steeks. Steek is an old Scottish word. Did I say that right? Old Scottish word, meaning a stitch in sewing or knitting. And steeking, a steek is a vertical section of your knitting where you've deliberately placed a line that you cut, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. And steeking actually means that you cut into your knitting, which is really scary, but I'm going to try and take the eek out of steek today. Do you see what I did there? Hey? Anyway, I'm going to ask the camera to turn to the worktop and I'll show you exactly what I mean and how to do it. Okay, so let me get in the right position for you to see. So, what we have here is actually a bit of fabric that has been steeked and cut. This was something that I did some time ago, and it was knit in the round. Trish, hi Trish, thank you for joining us. And I should say, please do say hi when you join in today. If you're asking any questions, and I encourage you to put any questions or comments in the thread below, but please know, other than your name popping up, I actually can't see the question while I'm doing this Facebook Live, but I will respond as soon as possible afterwards. Okay, so this was a little bit of steeking that I did in the round some while ago as a sample. And I've done two different things here. When I cut it, I did one with a crocheted reinforcement and the other with a hand stitched. And you can see that actually it's not going anywhere. That has held the stitches nicely. Now, steeks are usually done when we're doing colour work, stranded colour work, just like this sample here. Because colour work is often easier when you do it in the round. You can do it flat, of course, but when you do it in the round, you can see the pattern emerge on the right side of the work, and you don't have strands of yarn running up the sides, all the more to sort of, disrupt your tension. Knitting in the round tends to give you an even tension most of the time. So I do advise where you can to do colour work in the round. So although you can shape your knitting in the round, certainly you can, with decreases and increases. If you're making garments other than socks and hats and cowls and sort of tubular things, you're going to need openings for sleeves, for necks, and certainly for front openings if you're doing a cardigan or a jacket. So by creating steeks afterwards, the knitting remains uninterrupted and the consistent tension tends to be maintained. Nevertheless, it's a really scary thought cutting into hours of work. So we do need to reinforce the steek before we cut it. Having said that, I should say that knitted stitches naturally want to unravel downwards, as we all know when we drop a stitch or two. It shoots downwards often faster than you can catch it. but they tend to be very reluctant. They resist unraveling sideways, which is to the benefit of us when we're steeking. Now, very traditional methods of steeking, when the knitted fabric is created with a really tight gauge and what we call a sticky yarn, they're not always reinforced, because when they're cut, they tend to stick together and felt themselves. That said, I wouldn't recommend working with unenforced steeks until you really know what you're doing. Carpensa, I hope I'm saying that correctly. With a car or sa. Anyway, welcome. So what's a sticky yarn, you might ask? Well, Shetland wools and untreated wools, yarns made mostly of animal fibres, this is 100% wool, they tend to grab onto each other. They're considered sticky yarns. This is also 100% wool. But if the yarn has been treated, if it's a superwash yarn, it's not going to felt. And if you saw the episode that we did on brioche, I explained, again, that's another technique where, certainly for a beginner, using a slightly sticky yarn or a yarn that grips onto itself is good in brioche. And the reason that wool is good for that is because it is like hair. It has scales. And when when they're sort of together, they tend to lift, the scales lift, and the yarn kind of grabs onto itself. Exactly the same reason that if you wash wool when it's too hot, it's going to felt. Or if you agitate it too much, it's going to felt. So superwash yarn has been treated. It's a bit like hair being covered in conditioner. Superwash yarn has been treated so it won't felt, which is great for washing, but it's not great for if you want it to grab onto itself. So just watch your labels. And certainly you can use steeking with synthetic yarns or cotton or linen yarns, but I'd advise when you reinforce those, you want to use sewing machine stitches for the reinforcing, and probably several rows. And you definitely need to do a test swatch first. So I wouldn't for your first steeking experience, I'd do a swatch with a wool to start off with, or at least a high percentage of wool content. Let me get these out the way. Now, I did say that animal fibres tend to have a kind of sticky effect. This is alpaca, so it's 100% animal fibre, but alpaca is quite sleek, it's slippery, it doesn't tend to felt. So just be aware of that. And later in the new year, we will do a whole programme on the different types of fibres, and I'll show you samples made up so you can see what happens when we block them and wash them and do things with them. But just be careful about that. And if you have any questions about the yarn that you're using, if you want to practice some steeking, just drop me a line. I'll be happy to answer that. So back to our little samples here. So if your pattern, Marilyn has joined us. Thank you for joining, Marilyn. How are you? So if your pattern doesn't allow for steeking, you'll need to add some extra stitches. And it could simply be a few stitches of sort of one-on-one colour like that, of alternate colours. You can just say that was at the where you want to cut for your, maybe it's a cardigan or something. You'll need to add on a few stitches, and you could just do that panel of stitches in something like this. And you can do more than you need to if you want, but you will need to account for that. But again, check the pattern first and add the stitches if needed. The stitches that you add don't have to be in the pattern that you're doing in terms of the knit pattern, the colour work pattern. Just sort of delineate them by doing a few stitches or a few lines of stitching using both the yarns that you're using. And after the steek is cut, because I wouldn't leave it like that, I'm going to, if this is a garment, I'm going to encase it in a button border or a neckband or something like that. Sometimes steek garments have a facing, they have a grosgrain ribbon, something like that. But that's going to be stitched in or on the wrong side. It's going to be covered up by the time I've done my garment. So I'm going to show you now my steeks that we're actually going to cut in a minute and how to make them. So I've done I've prepared 3 here. This is a hand sewn. Can we see that okay? This one is hand stitched. with all of these three, and I'll go through them in a minute, all I've done here is put a line of long running stitches. This is the line that I'm going to cut. Okay, so wherever you want to actually your cut to be, I would do a line of stitches, and I've just sort of secured it at both ends so I don't pull it out accidentally. Then what I've done is I've done a running stitch, and I'll explain all this to you in a minute. You'll see me do this. I've done the other side of this stitch. I'll show you on a diagram too in a second. So this is my going up the middle of the V's, if you will. So my V's are going like this. I've gone up the middle. So my running stitch has sort of gone up the middle of those ladders. Now what I'm going to do in a moment, I'm going to look for the stitch the other side of this. Let me bring in this now just to show you. So on this hand sewn one, can we see that? So this is my red line here of my running stitches. Now what I've done here is I've just stitched very small running stitches starting from the cast on edge. I've done stitched running stitch, then I've come down this way and done a back stitch, and I've done the same this side. I've done a running stitch. I've grabbed every stitch in the length of my knitting with a small running stitch, then I've come over the top and then I've back stitched, and you'll see it more clearly when I'm actually doing it. But if I can, when I pull that apart, you can just about see those ladders, not ladders as in dropped stitch, but the rungs almost between that hold the stitch together. So what I've done here, I've gone the other side. This is my stitch. I'm not going to cut there. I'm going to cut there, but I'm also not going to sew on this other V. I go to the next stitch across, and I'm going to do running stitches. Sorry, my running stitches are here. My running stitches are the other side of that. So if you will, they're on the right leg of the next stitch over. My running stitches are there. Then I'm going to come up and over the top and down, and I'm back stitching. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. I just wanted to show you all three of these first before I turn over to the other side. This I've done with a crochet hook. Same principle. My running stitch up the middle, my line where I'm going to cut is right here. You can see that there. I've done that in a different colour. And I've done a slip stitch with my crochet hook on the stitch exactly next to where I'm going to cut. In this instant, I'm going right next to where I'm going to cut. And I've crocheted all the way down. I've done the same thing with this one, but instead of doing a slip stitch as I did there, I did a single crochet. The principle is the same, but you can see very clearly there my line of stitches that I'm going to cut. And you can see by doing a single crochet, it kind of creates almost an edge, a border there. And then when I cut that, that's going to hold on to that. Okay. So I think it's clearer when I actually show you what I'm doing. So I've just put some lines here of running stitches, and I'm going to show you how to do the sewn one first, then I'm going to do the crochet one. So I'm going to take that away because I think I'm going to get caught up on that. I need to just swivel sideways slightly so you can see. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to start you off, and then when it comes to cutting them, because it does take time to do this, you don't want to rush this. It does take time to do it, so I'm just going to show you how I start off, and then we'll cut the steeks that I've already done. So remember, this is the hand sewn one. If I could bring that in, it might help see. So this is my red line that I've done my line of running stitches. Just caught that there. I'm going to start from the cast on edge. I'm going to start from the cast on edge with my running stitches. Now I'm going to go on the right side first. I'm not going here. I'm going over to this stitch, a whole stitch here, and I'm going to go, if you will, these are my V's of my knitting stitches. So I'm actually going to do my running stitches on the right leg of that particular side. you need to actually start a bit, you need to make this really secure. And I would actually sort of just start over here and just do a few sort of overcast stitches, if you will, to start you off, so that this bottom cast on edge doesn't unravel. I'm just doing one sort of fastening stitch there in the interest of time, but I would start and make sure that's really sound. Joanne, hi, thank you for joining us. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to do running stitches, but I'm going to make sure I grab each of the stitches. So I'm going to sort of penetrate the stitch really, and I'm on the right leg of that V stitch. So just looking at this little diagram again, I'm going up here, I'm doing running stitches. This is the stitch that I'm going to cut. This is the left leg of the next stitch. I'm going on the right leg of my running stitches. Okay, so I'm sort of puncturing all those stitches. Okay, I'm going to go a bit quickly because I want to get to the top and show you how to do the back stitch on the way down. So, but if I were doing this properly, I would take great care. I'm just trying to show you what I'm doing. So I'm doing running stitches. Obviously I'm doing a different color, but I would suggest it kind of doesn't matter. If you're going to enclose the edges, you could certainly do a different color so you can see them. And I would use a thinner yarn. Don't try and do it with the same yarn that you've knitted with. It's going to be really bulky and thick. Okay, so I'm just whizzed up to the top. I would do a much better job if I was doing it properly. Now I'm going to turn my work round and I'm going to back stitch down the other side of that leg. So I've gone up here, the right side of my V stitch. Now I'm going to come down on this one, which is closest to my cutting edge. And I'm going to do a back stitch here. Again, I would make sure this is really secure, because when you cut that, you don't want that starting to unravel. So with a back stitch, you kind of, again, I want to make sure I catch all the stitches, but I want to do a really sturdy back stitch. And if you haven't done a back stitch before, you're sort of doing 2 steps forward, 1 step back almost, or perhaps it's the other way around. Anne, hi, thank you for joining us. So again, I'm going to sort of lollop ahead, but you want to make sure they're done firmly. And I would suggest blocking your knitting or the pieces that you're going to steek before you steek them, because you want the size to be right. And it's a bit easier on this one in the sense that you can see where your back stitches are. And again, I'm going a bit fast here and I'm sitting at a funny angle. So if I was doing this properly, I'd make sure it was much neater. Oh, what have I done there? I got caught up at the back somewhere. Okay, there we go. But you can see my rather large back stitches. You want to make sure you catch all the stitches. So you do a line of running stitches on this one going up, then coming down, you're doing back stitches. Let me lollop ahead here, or leap ahead perhaps I should say, but I'm keeping clear of this middle stitch where I'm going to cut up the middle. Okay, I'm making sure that my back stitches are in the stitch the other side. Okay, so you can see again they're a bit big and I'd want those a bit smaller, but you can see quite clearly on the wrong side that your back stitches are running along there. Tanis, hi, nice of you to join us, thank you so much. You see the running stitches and you can see that back stitch, and you can see clearly there my cut line when I'm about to do it. Okay, and then obviously you would do the same up the other side, and you would go to this stitch. So your running stitch will be on the left leg of of the left side, and your back stitch will be on the right side of the right leg. You want your back stitch nearing the cutting line. Okay, I'm just going to snip that off and show you now how to do the crochet in the interest of time. Okay, so our crocheted one, and then I will show you how to do the cutting, which is always the fun bit. So, Deborah, hi, thank you for joining us. So with the crochet version, I've still got my red line, which is going to be my cutting line. But this time I'm actually going to use both legs of the stitches either side, so that my crocheted, I'm going to use both legs of the stitch. I'm not jumping one, I'm going to actually butt up to this line, my cutting line. I want that to be really close. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's try this hook. Let me get some yarn here. Again, I'm using a thinner yarn. Let me just get started. I'm not going to do too much to fasten it at the top, but just note that you need to, okay, you're going to need to start your crochet here. Just do a few slip stitches or single crochet there. I'm just going to fasten it and make sure it doesn't unravel. Bernadette, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I've got my crochet hook. I've got a crochet hook that's about the right size for this type of yarn. And if I can, and I'm going to start from the bound off edge. And of course I've used a very thick part of the knitting where I've actually cast off. So what I'm actually doing is, let's get this round the other way. I'm a bit cack-handed here because I'm trying to be sideways doing this. Okay, there's my crochet. So, but you need to do a few crochet stitches up here to make sure that's secure. I'm just going in with one at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my yarn round, and then I'm going to pull that through. This crochet hook is a bit thick. I'm not liking this. Okay, I'm going to start again with a smaller hook. Okay, let's just go straight in. I want to show you. So that's better. Start again. So I'm pulling. Slow down, Cheryl. Pulling my yarn through. There we go. Let's get going, and then you'll see. It's better once you see what I'm doing. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a slip stitch here. And it does help if you sort of fold. In some ways, doing it as a crochet reinforcement is easier than a hand sewn one, because you can actually fold your stitches so you can really see what you're doing. So all I'm doing here is slip stitching along. Don't want to get my running stitches caught. So I'm slip stitching with my crochet hook, making that nice and firm. And I'm going in every stitch. Okay. And I think I missed one there, but you get the idea. Okay. So you can see there, I've got a few slip stitches going, and you can see now that's creating a ridge. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to change pathway through to show you if I was doing a single crochet. I'm doing exactly the same thing. All I'm doing there, this gets you a more bound off edge. I'm just doing a single crochet, and then we'll cut the ones I've already done. So you would do this, you would make sure you go in every stitch. And I do think the crochet one is a little bit easier to do, because you can fold this line of stitching, you can really see what you're doing. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to do a few stitches so you can see the difference. Cut that. And obviously you would do, so that was single crochet. This is, I'm sorry, that's slip stitch, that's single crochet. You can see the difference, and it's actually a bit clearer, but it depends what you're making. It depends which way you want to do it. Either are good. And obviously you would go all the way down, then you would have to fasten off, do a few more crochet stitches there just to make sure that locks. then you would do the same thing on the other side. So what you end up with is what we have here. Now, here's the fun part. We're going to cut. Now, I do know steakers that say they get a glass of wine in front of them and a box of chocolates and get themselves nicely kind of settled, and then they go with their scissors. I think it's a bit early for me for wine, but I do recommend the chocolates, but I would have the wine afterwards once I've successfully done it. You do need sharp scissors for sure. I would go very gently to start off with. Okay, let me get so the camera can see. Okay, I'm trying to get under, so now I'm going to cut this one first. So this is where I'm cutting, right up the middle here. This is my stitched steek. Oh, it's scary. I am going to just take that bit out there so I can see where I'm going. Here we go. Oh, now just this noise is just fabulous. There is something about steeking and the noise that's so kind of luscious. Oh, it's scary, I know. Ta-da! There we go. That's not going anywhere. And it certainly won't be going anywhere once you've bound it. Okay. Right. That's our first steek done. Now this one is actually quite interesting. I will just tell you about this one. When I blocked this last night, it actually has taken a bit longer to dry than I expected. So I started to do this when it was still a bit damp. And what's interesting here, this is the slip stitch crochet version. You can see the fibers have actually started to sort of mat a bit. Well, that's great because that means they're grabbing onto each other. But because that was damp and I was fingering it a lot, it was agitating the yarn. So it's kind of almost felted itself, which is just what I want. I'm going to use bigger scissors on this one. Let me just get started and then I'll turn around. So I'm going to go in there. Can I get under the camera here? I want you to see. So I'm going to go straight up where my running stitch is. And I'm using bigger stitches here. I would go carefully when you start off. Don't want to cut the crocheted stitches. You just want to cut up that clear line where you have your running stitches. You can just see those running stitches now. How cool is that? And then lastly, this one with the single crochet. Again, I'm going to use my bigger scissors. Just make sure you separate that before you start cutting. Can you hear that noise? The sound of a steek. How cool is that? Very satisfying. Yes, there we go. Now you can have your glass of wine and really enjoy your steeking. So that is the basis of steeking. I hope that has taken the eek out of steek for you. Okay, so I'm going to ask the camera to come back to me. I hope you enjoyed that. There's something very satisfying about cutting a steek. So, as I say, I hope that's taken the eek out of the word. No wonder it has that in it. So last week I told you about my Christmas giveaway, which is a knitting session with me. And it's a one-to-one knitting session with me. And details are on a video on the Knitter Matters page, and all the instructions of how you can enter to win that are there too. I've had many entries so far, so it's very exciting. There is still time to enter. The closing date is the 28th of December, and I'll get back to the winner shortly after that. So do enter if you would like a knitting session with me, and it can be about whatever you want it to be. Whether you're a newbie knitter and you just want to start off, that's fine. If you want more advanced techniques, it's your session. We can do that. And if you're not sure, if you don't know what you don't know, that's fine too. It's my job to create the lesson for you, and it will be done virtually. So wherever you are, it can be done. Don't forget, our friends at Mary Maxim offer a 20% discount off of one item in your cart. MaryMaxim.com. knittermatters.com, and that would be the highest priced item in your cart, but you must use the promo code Cheryl at checkout. Use the promo code and you'll get the 20% off. As always, this episode of Knitter Matters and all others are uploaded to our Facebook page afterwards, and they're also on the YouTube channel of the same name, so you can find all the replays there. Now, it's been a tough year for everyone, and I want to thank you all for being part of Knitter Matters. I really couldn't have done it without you. When I started this in March, I really thought I might just be sitting here talking to myself, but I want to thank you for your support and all the wonderful suggestions that you have. I really couldn't do it without you, and I am enormously grateful. And I do look forward to coming back in January and starting a new season of Knitter Matters with you. And if you have any ideas of what you want to do or what you'd like to learn, feel free to let me know. The Knitter Matters Facebook page is there for you to put your ideas and thoughts into. So we'll be back on January the 5th, and I will post a reminder about the time, but for the time being, from Mabel, who's looking very festive today, from Mabel and me, I want to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas, and most importantly, a safe, happy and healthy New Year. And in the meantime, stay calm, stay safe and stay knitting. And I look forward very much to seeing you next year. Bye until then.